Hey guys, Christopher here. Welcome today to a new video. In this video, this is part 1 of a series on Newton 2.0. So what is Newton 2.0? It's basically a 2D physics simulator inside of After Effects, which allows you to make simulations that correspond to real world physics. So it sounds all a bit like complicated and stuff, but it's actually quite easy and really cool. So I'll just show you right now. Alright, so in this tutorial, we'll just be focusing on some basic things like object bounciness, friction, density, and how objects react to each other in Newton 2.0. So Newton 2.0 works with two types of things, shape layers and mask layers. They don't work with, Newton doesn't work with pictures or text, and in later tutorials, I'll tell you guys how to make Newton work with text and etc. But for today, we'll just be focusing on the basics. So go ahead and create a shape layer by hitting the Q key to select your shape layer, to select your shape tool, and you can hit Q to change the shape that you want. So for today's tutorial, I'm going to be making a basic rectangle over here. Just make it blue and rename it table 1. Alright, then I'll be creating a second table like that, right? And I'll be naming table 2. Next, I'll also be making a circular ball, just this, and placing it over the table. That ball 1, and create another ball over here. Just not confuse ourselves. Let's make it greenish and name it ball 2. Alright, so now that you have a whole scene set up, what you need to do is just go over to composition, Newton 2, and you see that everything is in order. Alright, so what does Newton 2.0 do? Basically, like I said, it simulates physics, and that means gravity, friction, etc. So if you hit play at the bottom, that will basically allow it to simulate what's happening. You notice that everything just basically falls, because that's what would happen in the real world if we were to just let go of objects. They would just free fall to the ground. So to combat that, what we need to do is edit the properties of the bodies inside of Newton to make sure that they have the characteristics that we want them to have. So first things first, the table, we want it to be a static object. Now there are different types of bodies in Newton 2.0, and I'll be going through each one of them in different tutorials, but for today we'll be focusing on two, which is basically static and dynamic. So a static object basically doesn't react to gravity. All it does is react to the objects around it. The second type is dynamic. Dynamic reacts to everything inside of Newton 2.0, which means magnetism, gravity, and everything else, basically collective of objects, etc. So dynamic is what we want for our two balls over here, but static is what we want for our two tables over here. So now you can see if I hit play, the balls move while the two tables don't. So nothing really exciting here. You can see it's just stuff moving as if it's according to physics. So now we'll be going through three different properties of bodies inside of Newton. So the first property of the body would be the density. So when density increases, let's just take a look at let's just focus on the green ball over here. When the density of the green ball increases, you can see that it looks a bit more weighty. So let me show you again. So you see when it drops, it's like bam, and stops. If we were to decrease the density of the green ball to, I don't know, 0.27, you can see that it bounces a bit before it stops. The density is much different. It's different from 10.0, you can see that, to, let's say, I don't know, 0.01. So why would you use density for? Well, as you know, in real life, things like iron or steel, they're much denser than things like cardboard, etc. So if you were simulating that this is an iron ball, you would increase the density to make it behave as if it's an iron ball. If it's not an iron ball and it's maybe something like cardboard, you could decrease the density to make sure that it behaves like cardboard. And so that's basically what density is. It changes how the object reacts and makes it look more realistic. Alright, next thing we'll be focusing on is bounciness. I'll go to friction later on. So bounciness is basically what it implies. If you increase the bounciness, bump it up to 1.0, you can see that it bounces a lot more, looks like a rubber ball. And if you decrease the bounciness to 0.0, it like barely bounces at all. So that's bounciness, very self-explanatory. Once again, makes things more realistic. If you're doing a rubber ball, it will bounce more and stuff. So that's basically what bounciness is. Next, let's take a look at friction. So right now, now our focus will be on the purple ball. Let me hit play. As you can see, the purple ball just rolls until it stops around like here. Alright, so now if we were to increase the friction of the surface over here, the table 1 over here, let's increase it all the way to 1.0, you can see that the ball doesn't move as far as it did early on. That's because the friction of the ball is that's because the friction of the table is increased, so the ball is so-called like rougher on the ball. If we were to decrease the friction of the table all the way to 0.0, the ball, as you can see, it's just spinning and sliding as if this was ice. You can see it's not even turning, it's just sliding on its side. See that again? It's just sliding on its side. It looks like there's all on the floor, that the floor is made of ice, and so that's basically what friction does. Friction, when you decrease friction, it gets more slippery, and when you increase friction, it gets rougher. Now, one last thing before I end this tutorial that you might have noticed is that the balls here don't actually look like balls. They look more like polygons, and that's because of this thing called mesh precision. In order to ensure that simulations can be run faster without you having to constantly wait for it to simulate, there's this thing called mesh precision, which when you increase the mesh precision, the object becomes more circular in shape. So you can see this is a mesh precision of 7, and this is a mesh precision of 2. So when you render your stuff out and you want to bring it into After Effects, you definitely want to increase your mesh precision so that the object looks like how it's supposed to look like. If you were to decrease it to 2, it would just look like a polygon, which wouldn't really look very nice. But for now, for the purposes of simulation, we can keep it low, even though it doesn't really correspond to real physics that much. We keep it low so that when I hit play, it renders out almost immediately. Alright, so just to recap, the 3 things that we learned today are basically how to 4 things that we learned today, basically the 2 different types of bodies, dynamic and static, the density of an object, the friction of an object, and the bounciness of an object. So thanks for watching part 1 of this tutorial. Tune in for part 2 as I explain more about how you can use Newton 2.0 to create better videos and cooler animations. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.